he's had family this past week, so. All right, we're going to start out in Luke chapter 1. That's Luke. That's in the Old Testament, Dwayne. As you can see, it's not just Sarah and Betty that I harass. I know how to do it well. We've been looking at different people in the Bible, and the last couple of weeks, we were looking at Abraham and Sarah. And today we start with a fellow named Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. Anybody remember anything about them? They're old too.
He's a priest.
Okay, he's a priest. Anything else you know about him?
Very important son.
They have a very important son, but not for a long time. By New Testament times, there were literally hundreds of thousands of people of the tribe of Levi that qualified as priests to serve. They're broken up, according to 1 Chronicles 24, into 24 different divisions. Each of those divisions will then serve a period of time, a few weeks or so, and then even if they serve for just 1 week, you think about it. How many times is that division going to serve again, that group of priests going to serve again before the end of the year? Just one more. I vaguely remember something about 52 weeks in a year. And so with 24 different divisions, each group of priests is only going to be able to serve. And each group of those priests have a few 100,000 qualified men to serve. So they tend to choose people to come and serve. It would be to come to Jerusalem, serve in the temple. It would be a great honor. But it boils down to, according to one priest from that era, a fellow named Josephus, if you've read any of his works, he writes in the latter half of the 1st century, and Josephus says there were so many qualified priests that any given individual would get to serve as basically the high priest for the day. Once in a lifetime. There's so many of them to serve. High priest for the day means that one of the 2 times that they take incense and take prayers into the holy place of the temple, that would be the priest selected to take the sacrifices and act as the high priest for that day. So here is a man that Luke is going to describe. What's Luke's profession? Okay, he's a doctor. Anybody able to read their doctor's writing? Have you seen how they scribble? It's a wonder that anybody can figure out what. What's more is Luke, as a very educated man, tends to write. Now, I have to be careful what I say about the Greek language with one of my daughters here. She'll check me up on all of these things. But Luke is the only writer of the New Testament that writes more in classical Greek style. And he uses phrases. Now, you understand there's a difference between how the special classical people of the world speak, like here in the South, and then there's all them other people in the world that just don't talk good. Isn't it amazing? You can always tell somebody comes down to the South and tries to act like a Southerner. They're not very good at it, are they? It gets funny sometimes. But that is in a sense, classical Greek was the standard for good writing, for good communication, even in the New Testament world. But that doesn't always match kind of the slang and the vernacular that gets used by common, ordinary, everyday. What were the professions of most of the other? Anybody know what the jobs were of the other New Testament writers? What? Michelle? Fishermen. There's some fishermen in there. What else? Tax collector. Oh boy, that's a good one, huh? What else, Deborah? Tent maker. Now the tent maker cheats. He's actually kind of in between the classical Greek and the average everyday writing. Peter, of course, and the apostles like that tend to fit in the everyday type of writers. But what was Paul's background in education?
Went to school preaching.
Okay. He is the number one assistant to the chief high priest. Not high priest, but chief of the... get my words right here. What? Sanhedrin. That's why I keep her. She straightens me out. The Sanhedrin is the Jewish Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice, in effect, was Paul's teacher. Normally, the way it worked in the Sanhedrin was each justice had a student that was primed to fill their spot when they passed. And as it turns out, who was the Chief Justice? Well, Paul's teacher, what was his name? Who? Gamaliel. Gamaliel is well known by his writings even today. And his son actually comes along only late in life, and so where normally you would have thought of a Chief Justice hiring his son to take over for him, it appears that his protege is this young Saul of Tarsus. So he is well educated and on his way. Of course, it's funny how God messes up plans sometimes. We think that this is what we're going to do, and this is how things are going to work out. And you remember Abraham and Sarah? The last couple of weeks, God's told them you're going to be parents, you're going to have a child, and they're getting to old age, and this is not going to happen. So we need to help God out. And that little reminder: the one who laughs last laughs best, and God always laughs last. And why is that especially appropriate? What's their son name? What's Abraham and Sarah's son name? He laughs. Isaac is literally, in Hebrew, he laughs. So making plans is one thing, and of course here's a couple that they have made plans how to live their life. They've given up on having children. Luke begins, one of the things that doesn't appear usually in translations, he actually begins verse 5, Luke 1:5, with the phrase, "It happened in those days." That's an introductory phrase. That's a very typical phrase for a Greek historian to write. Luke's the educated man. But most translations pick up the idea that it's during the reign. Okay, so during the reign of who?
Herod.
Which Herod? Great, if that wasn't a self-appointed term. Herod the Great. And great is really a great description of him. This guy is a tremendous politician. Herod the Great, what's he famous for? What do you think of Herod the Great as doing that he's really famous for? At least as far as the New Testament is concerned. Killing babies, huh? He's the one that orders the babies put to death in Bethlehem. When he finds out from the wise men that there's been a king born, that we'll fix that. Let's kill all the babies. How long has it been? Well, the wise men evidently tell him it's been a couple of years that they've been following the star and getting things organized to visit him. So let's just kill all the babies 2 years and younger. Make sure we get them all. By the way, there is no, so far, independent document outside of the New Testament that verifies that. And it's hilarious to me that sometimes people come along and say, well, see there, that proves the New Testament's not reliable. We never heard anything from any other writer. If you know anything at all about Herod the Great, you know that story is just absolutely a part of his character. That was who he was. He murdered his favorite wife, Marianne. You know why? Because somebody said, I think she's having an affair. She wasn't. And in fact, when he found out, after he'd murdered her, that she wasn't, he starts dedicating all kinds of buildings to her and this is a wonderful wife, but he'd already killed her. When Herod the Great comes to the point in his life where he's about to die, he realizes that he's been such a rotten character to the Jewish people that he gathers all the Jewish elders from every city in Judea and imprisons them and gives his soldiers orders. The moment you hear that I'm dead, you kill every last one of them. That way, everyone in Judea will mourn my death. Funny little footnote to that. His soldiers, when they hear that he's died, release those men. And they all go back to their families. They don't put them to death. Apparently, even his own soldiers didn't respect him that much. But he was Herod the Great in a lot of other ways. One of the things have you ever heard of a thing called the Olympics? I love it how we talk about, in our world today, the modern Olympics, because they have been restarted just like the ancient Olympics. You know who actually started the modern Olympics? Herod the Great. It had already fallen out of favor and no longer being practiced as the Olympics. And Herod the Great comes along and he says, hey, we need to restart this tradition. And he personally finances restarting the tradition. Little historical footnotes of things that tie in. One of the feeder cities, the games that qualifiers for the Olympics have to attend, one of those is a place called Corinth. And it happens in the year that Paul visits there. He's out there on the plains of Corinth making tents. You know where he found business? With thousands, hundreds of thousands of people attending those games, both as athletes and as supporters and just fans. Nobody today watches sports, do they? Paul had a huge audience to not only preach to, but to keep him employed with his tent-making business. Anybody that's ever gone camping knows that sooner or later you're going to develop a rip in that tent, and it needs to be fixed. So Herod the Great. During the reign, Luke says, of Herod, king of Judea, there lived a priest named Zechariah who belongs to the priestly division of Abijah. Okay, that's one of those 24 divisions. He will serve, it's the 8th group on the list there, if you check 1 Chronicles. But he will serve once in his lifetime with the honor of actually taking the offering in one day to the temple. He will probably get to go and attend as one of the supporting priests several more times during his lifetime, but he will only have that one time in his life. He had a wife named Elizabeth, who is also a descendant of Aaron. They were both, Luke says, interestingly enough, they were both righteous in the sight of God, following all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blamelessly. Now, remembering Abraham, the father, the ancestor of all the faithful, does that mean that they never made a mistake in their lives? No. How many mistakes did Abraham make in his life? Well, that's a list that's way too long to count, isn't it? But, in spite of all that, they did not have a child. Elizabeth was barren, and Luke adds a little footnote, sounds like a doctor, doesn't he? The end of verse 7 says, and they were both very old. Now while Zechariah was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the holy place of the Lord and to burn incense there. The whole crowd of people were praying outside at the hour of the incense offering. So this twice a day, that sacrifices and the offering was made, and the priest would go into the temple. He's there for that. His day. Zechariah, serving as priest before God, his division on duty, is chosen by lot, as was the custom of the priesthood, to enter the holy place of the Lord and burn incense. Now think about it. Only the priests could do it. We see pictures of the temple a lot. Only the priests could ever go into the holy place. Behind that, through another curtain, and by the way, we think of the curtain as being, like those little curtains. That curtain was several feet thick. And so there was a maze that the person had to walk through to get into the most holy place. Who went in there? The high priest. How often? One time a year. Only one time a year. But the other priests could serve out their term and would, as in New Testament times, get to at least once in a lifetime, get the chance to go into the holy place, to look at that veil. By the way, what happens to that veil at the resurrection of Jesus? Do you remember? Ripped from top to bottom. Boy, there's a whole lesson there, isn't there? All of a sudden there's no separation between the priests and God and the people. Zechariah is going to enter. And what's everybody else doing? Verse 10, the whole crowd of people praying outside at the hour. And as he goes in, now you think about the situation. Here he goes into this place. It's gold plated. He knows that he's the only one of two that will go in that day. And it will be the only time in his lifetime. There's nobody else in there. There's not a chance of anybody else knowing what's going on in there. And he hears a voice. Talk about heart attack material. That's it. What's more, he sees somebody else. One of the strange things, you know how you tell an angel on TV shows? Anytime somebody sees an angel, you remember what it is that you can? They always have a halo on their heads, right? Oh, they'd show up occasionally. If you look just right, you can see them. How do you know that that that's an angel? I don't know. There's never a discussion about how you knew that it was an angel. Oh, they flapped their wings. Did angels have wings? Never a description of angels with wings. Entirely different creatures that Ezekiel sees that have wings. And he names them as entirely different creatures. But the angels? Several times angels appear and seem to look like people. Other times they appear and immediately, whoa, that's an angel. I don't know what they look like. But I do know that many times when people saw them, they were afraid of them. That's what happens here, verse 10. Zechariah is visibly shaken when he saw the angel. It's standing on the right side of the altar. It appears to him, and he sees with fear. By the way, if you want to poke fun at men, there's some hilarious stories in the Old Testament. Remember a guy named Samson? His mother meets the angel of the Lord, and he gives her instruction. And Samson's father says, well, I want to meet him. And when he gets to meet him, what does he do? We're going to all die. That's my grandson Joshua's favorite line. All die. That's us. No hope for us. Usually said that about somebody else's driving. We'll see how well that works with him driving. Terrified. And by the way, Samson's mother has to explain to her husband, said, look, we're not going to die because the angel's been telling us we're going to have a son and instructions about having that son. What's wrong with you? Samson's mother.
Oh, Samson's mother. Right, sorry.
Yeah. So, Zechariah sees something that leaves him shaken, afraid, and the first thing the angel says to him is, do not be afraid. So there's something scary about this. At the very least, the fact that there's somebody else in the holy place when there's not supposed to ever be but that one priest. Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. If God appeared to you and said, look, your prayer has been heard, would you be busy thinking, which prayer? Which one? And you have to wonder, here is Zechariah as an old man with an old wife, no chance of children. Did he come in there before the presence of God on his one occasion, and is he busy thinking about personal things? Says, oh, if only I had a child. No way of knowing. But the angel says, your prayer has been heard, and your wife will bear you a son, and you will name him John. Pretty strange things. Pretty strange thing to see and to be told. Worst of all, keep in mind what the son is to be named. John. Why John? Don't know. Joy and gladness will come to you, and many will rejoice at his birth. He will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink. Will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. Okay, what is the Old Testament vow? Nazirite vow. What else is involved in the Nazirite vow?
No haircut.
No haircuts.
No touching anything dead.
no trimming, no cutting of any hair. What do you suppose by the time John the Baptist, say some 30 years, 25, 30, 35 years of age, begins publicly preaching? What does he look like? Pretty wild man. This guy's never had a haircut. Now, he might be handsome like some of us and no haircut and still look good. But you think about it. This guy, and again, one of those things, have you ever seen pictures that people put in the Bible, the photographs of John the Baptist and what he looked like? He had shoulder-length hair and a nicely trimmed beard and mustache and everything. And that's not a good picture at all. Obviously, that was artificial intelligence drawing that picture. He would have looked pretty wild. Quite a sight to see. The angel continues, says, he will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. He will go before as a forerunner before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. That's one to keep in mind. One of the things that comes up is a discussion a lot of times about John the Baptist. He will be asked point blank, hey, John, are you Elijah? And he'll say, nope. You remember my name? You remember what you just called me? I'm John. There's a difference between literal and figurative. And we understand that everywhere in life. Well, how could they miss that? Good question. Jesus will be asked about it one time, and he said, well, if you really want to understand things, he is Elijah. Is he or isn't he? Yes and no. He's in the spirit and power of Elijah. And his job is to turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children. Think about that a minute. What is he saying? What is the nation of Israel like as far as their devotion to the Lord at that moment? The priesthood, the high priesthood, and many of the Pharisees have taken over virtually all the finances of the country. They own everything. Interesting little check, just to go back and read. What was the priesthood allowed to possess as far as land? What were they given for possession as far as land? Nothing. And yet they own the land, they control the land, they rent the land out, they're taking money from everybody else for things that do not, and God had said, are not supposed to belong to them. How was the priesthood supposed to make a living? You remember? By the offerings that the people, a portion of all the offerings brought to God went to the priesthood. And now they've basically, kind of sounds like a lot of religious people today, doesn't it? Be real pointed about it. I know God says this, but I think here's a wonderful idea. We'll do it my way. He'll turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children. They're going back to a time when they really counted God as someone to be listened to. The disobedient to the wisdom of the just make ready for the Lord a people prepared for him. Zechariah speaks to the angel. It's always an interesting one. I wonder how much silence there was after the angel quits talking before John gets up the courage to actually say something. And the hilarious part is, the first question he asks is, how can I be sure about this? I'm an old man, my wife is old too. How do I know you're telling the truth? Okay, just think about it. An angel appears to you and tells you something. And you recognize that angel is from God himself, and he's making prophecies about the future and what's going to happen. And And would you really stare at him and say, really? Are you sure? I mean, why is that the first thing that comes to mind there? Why didn't he pay attention the first time?
But it seems to be human nature. Sarah did the same thing.
He's just a real people. That's always a funny one. If you ever read any of the religious books of various religions, read about Buddha, read about Muhammad. There's some things in there you just read and say, nah, that's not real. But it's always amazing when you actually read what the text says in the Bible. It's talking about real people. They have flaws, they have warts, they have mistakes that they make, all over the place. They do dumb things, like us. And the first thing that seems to come to Zechariah's mind is, really? Are you sure? The angel answered him and said, I am Gabriel who stands in the presence of God. I was sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. Now because you did not believe my words. Uh-oh. Think about that. Zechariah's mind is racing 90 miles an hour already, and now he hears the angel say, now because you did not believe. What, am I fixing to have a heart attack? I'm going to die here? What's going to happen? Now because you did not believe my words, which would be fulfilled in their time, you'll be silent, unable to speak, until the day these things are fulfilled, take place. Okay. Somebody remind me, how long does it take to make a baby? He's on duty for another couple of weeks. When's that baby due? It's going to be at least 10 months before he gets home and his wife is expecting a child. It's out there in the future. And he can't say a word. That's going to be tough, isn't it?
Looking for his wife.
How does he explain this to his wife? Yeah. What's going to happen? What do you see? Meanwhile, all the people, verse 21, are waiting for Zechariah. And they're wondering, what's taking him so long? You see the picture? Let those words sink in and make sense to you. Why he delayed in the holy place? When he came out, he was not able to. By the way, have you ever heard the little story, very famous preacher story, about them tying a rope on the leg of a priest so that when he went in case something like this happened and he had a heart attack and died, they could drag him back out? That story was made up about 900 years ago by a Jewish rabbi as an illustration. It never happened. If they died there in the holy place, they had to wait until the next priest went in and have him drag him out. And as far as we know, that never happened. Kind of funny how we make up stories sometimes. And by the way, let me throw in one extra bonus story. How many of you remember Jesus talking about how difficult it is to get into heaven? It's like a what going through the eye of a needle? A camel. There are so many stories written about that. One, well, he's talking about not just a camel, but a symbol of a camel, and it's a special thread. Nope. The words that Jesus uses were literally, in Greek, meant a camel going through the eye of a needle. And that led to the next great story story, you may have heard, there was a special gate in Jerusalem that was known as the Needle Gate. It was for when the city was under assault, and the only way you could get in was you had to force the camel down on its knees to crawl in. Yeah, try that sometime. If you think your husband or wife is cantankerous at times, can you imagine a camel, how cantankerous they are? Could you do that? Probably so. A really good camel driver might be able to do that. But here's the problem. There was never, ever a gate known as the Camel Gate. Not in Jerusalem, not in any place else that we've ever excavated. They shouldn't do that. They did a little fancier thing. They made the main entrance a series of traps so that anybody that came through the main entrance and was an enemy, they could make sure they killed them before they ever got through the gate there and into the city. They need a little tiny special camel gate. If you didn't belong there, they were going to kill you. And if you belong there, just walk right in and they'll let you live. But it's kind of amazing how many times we take something the Bible says and say, oh, I think we need to help God out a little bit and find an excuse for that. Maybe we ought to, okay, did you ever get told that by your parents? Maybe you ought to just pay attention to what you were told to do. We get tired of hearing that, don't we? From our parents. You know why parents use those words with their kids? Because they heard them. Just pay attention. People are waiting for Zechariah. He's delayed in the holy place. When he comes out, he's not able to speak to them. And they realize he's seen something in there, in the holy place. And he makes signs to them. I don't know if he knew American Sign Language and he could finger spell everything to them about what he saw. Or, you know, there is another way, and he does do this later on when his son is born. We won't get to that till next, but what would you do if somebody asked you a question you couldn't speak? You grab a tablet and write it down. By the way, one of those fun things. Do you realize that they had personal notepads, tablets in the New Testament world? They weren't pen and paper. They were stylus with a little thin backing, not much bigger than this, some of them. I've got a couple somewhere, I'll have to dig them out. You know what the writing surface is? Wax. And the pen or pencil is then just a little pointed scribe. It's for making notes. And everybody carried them. The merchant at the store, that was his calculator. He would sit there, and what do you do with a wax tablet when you need to erase that page? Yeah, you can just warm up the wax and melt it over. Beeswax works really well for those tablets. They sometimes mix it with other petroleum-based waxes. How about that? Okay, bonus, we're out of time. Little bonus story here. Do you know how oil was discovered in the Middle East? One geologist who had been assured, this is the early 1900s, had been absolutely assured by all geologists in the world that the Middle East did not contain, was the wrong kind of formation, would never contain any oil. This man happened to read the Bible and believe it. He read about a baby. Remember Moses' basket? What sealed it? Pitch. You know what pitch is? That's not when you wind up with a baseball and throw it. It's tar. And tar is petroleum. And this guy said, hey, there must be in Egypt. He drilled the first wells in Egypt And that led to all of the oil production in the Middle East. What was interesting to me about it was, I'm not sure where that one's gotten to, there was a little article printed in the Anniston, Alabama Star back in about 1925, 29 or so, that told this story about this wonderful discovery of oil in the Middle East. My dad kept a copy of it for years and gave me a copy of it. It's probably in a box somewhere. You know how that is when you move. But everybody knows that there's oil in the Middle East today. And the only reason that they know that is because a guy that disbelieved everything the rest of science told him and said, no, I think the Bible might be onto something. It might actually know what it's talking about. Do you suppose there are times when we should probably just listen to God instead of making excuses? Maybe he does know what he's talking about. Zechariah is going to find out even more about how much God knows. Here's a little question for you to think about. Do Zechariah and Elizabeth live long enough to see their son preaching and teaching and the work that he would do? There's no hint of it at all. He grows up and somewhere apparently at a fairly young age, teenager, young adult, goes out into the wilderness and lives there. You suppose that was because there was nobody left at home? And yet he still does what God called him to do. Probably a good lesson there too, but we're out of time. Thank you.